Hello there. Today I'm delighted to be looking at what I hope is a lovely little half bottle of sherry. This is from Gonzalez Byass. It's Tio Pepe, but this is the Tio Pepe on Rama. And this is the 2023 release of this, and that is the 14th release of this wine that they've made since 2009. Now, Tio Pepe is a famous sherry brand. It's the most searched for Fino Sherry on the Wine Searcher website. And generally it's a high quality Fino Sherry. Its wines tend to be aged for about 5 years, which is a couple of years longer than you'll get for the simplest entry-level Fino Sherries. And On Rama is a sort of an uncut, a raw version of Tio Pepe. And the idea is that this is a wine that will mimic the experience of trying the sherry actually straight from the barrel in the bodega. So the direct translation of On Rama is a branch, I believe. So it's the idea of sort of ripping a branch off a fruit tree and having that fruit straight in front of you. So Gonzalez Byass have released a version of this On Rama every year since 2009. Barrels from which the wine is drawn are selected in the spring of the year, at a time when, because of the climate, the floor yeast growing on top of these wines in the barrels is at its thickest. The wine is bottled unfined and unfiltered, so in its most natural state, and on the back of the bottle they actually say it should be drunk within 3 months of release. And each year they'll put a different label on the wine, and they have a historic collection of about 4,000 labels, and each year their designer will go in and take one of those labels and refresh the design to give a modern label that echoes a historic label from the past. So each label is distinctly different. One of the problems is that, as I say, this is the 2023 bottling, and we're now in January of 2025. So this is coming up to 2 years old. So a question we'll need to ask is, does this wine age effectively? What I know about lot 14 of Tio Pepe on Rama is that it was a selection of 98 butts of sherry. And traditionally the On Rama has been drawn from butts in 2 of Gonzalez Byass's bodegas, where the Fino Sherry soleras have been in operation since the 19th century. So these are the Constancia and the Rebelos bodegas. However, in 2023, a decision was made to include wine from a 3rd bodega, so wines were taken from the Grand Bodegas of Tio Pepe, and the Fino soleras here were laid down in the 1960s. The original base wine is produced from a white grape variety Palomino, which grows on the Albaritza, the white chalk soils of the Jerez region. Dry wines are produced and added to the soleras, where a bloom of floor yeast will grow on their surface as the wine ages. This yeast consumes small amounts of alcohol and any remaining sugars that are in the wine. So this is a wine that has less than 1 gram per litre of residual sugar, because over a period of 5 years in the solera, any of the sugars that have remained after fermentation are converted by the floor yeast into aldehydes. The floor will also consume a certain amount of the alcohol, so there'll be a slight drop in the alcohol of the wine during the aging process. And these aldehydes that are produced by the yeast are what gives floor sherry its distinctive saline pungency. Now in 2023 there was a particularly mild winter. They describe it as being spring-like, and as a result the growth of floor was strong, thick and vigorous on the top of the wine at the stage when this was drawn from the barrels. Selected wines were blended and bottled without fining or filtration. So let's have a look at it, shall we? Firstly, looking at the colour, we have an almost pale amber note to the colour. Slight bronze hints. The wine has 15% alcohol. That's pretty standard for a Fino Sherry. Once the wine had been fermented to dry, it will have been fortified. They'll have been careful to have fortified it to about that level, but no higher, because above that the floor yeast is unable to grow on it. Swelling it, it clings to the glass, but it's not a thick or rich wine, so it's not particularly forming tears. And again, that's the action of the yeasts consuming the sugars and the alcohols as the wine ages and producing aldehydes from them. So let's see what I make of the aroma, shall we? I was talking about this being pungent, and it certainly is. There is that salinity, and yet over the top of it there's a very obvious sort of yeasty, almost slightly doughy note. Looking beyond that, however, there is a lovely floral note. There's a touch of fruit tree blossom and fragrant orange. there is a sort of an underlying mineral note as well. There's a pungency, there's a complexity. It's not big and intense, but it certainly has a presence. So let's taste. On the palate again, there's a pungency, there's a real sort of grip of quite mineral acidity. Those mineral notes have a sort of an almost chalky, drying nature. There's a little bit of warmth and richness from the alcohol, and where that is, there are hints of almond and macadamia. So yes, the initial salinity is actually being balanced by a little bit of alcohol warmth, some real depth and some richness. And while the salty pungency comes through, it's quite overpowered the yeasty nature of the palate. The doughy aromas evident on the nose are being overlaid by some lovely rich fruit. There's almost a slight candied peel note as well. And the freshness lifts that really well to a long finish. The wine isn't big and heavy. Although it's got 15% alcohol, remember that floor has been consuming alcohols and sugars and those sort of things that would give more weight and richness to the mid palate here. This has an elegant light to mid-weight structure. There's some lovely pungency and lovely length. Some of these richer notes, some of the citric notes, candied orange peel and that sort of thing, coming from some aging that's gone on subsequent to the wine being bottled, as well as that which is contributed by the cask aging side of things. The wine's fascinating, there's plenty to taste, it's very enjoyable. Overall, we have a Wine Searcher aggregated critic score for this wine of 91 out of 100, although I would say that that is an aggregation of scores from all the different lots of Rama that have been released. I'm afraid we don't separate them out on our system, so I can't see what this particular lot would have scored as opposed to previous iterations. I certainly don't think the wine suffered from the fact that it's had some time to age in bottle. However, I think you need to be aware that if you want to appreciate the freshness of trying Fino Sherry from the barrel without actually travelling to Spain to visit the bodega, you'd have to keep a very careful eye out for the Rama releases when they're made, so that you can pick them up fresh. So thank you so much for joining us for the tasting. I do hope you found it of interest. If you have, do please press the like button, we'd really appreciate that. If you have any comments you'd like to leave, please pop them in the comments box below. We'd be fascinated to hear your views on the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. If you have friends you think might like to watch this video, do please feel free to pass it on to them. We'd really appreciate your endorsement in that way. I will pop a link in the comments box below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this wine. As I say, I'm afraid our listing doesn't actually separate out the different lots, so you'd have to be careful looking at the label when you purchase it. On the back you'll see there's a bottling date which will define which lot it was and how long it's been in bottle. But the link I'll leave will take you to a page where you can find out more about the winemaking, the producer, the region, the grape variety. We have links that will take you to our critics pages so you can see what they've had to say about it, and you can see reviews left by other users. There's also information such as price history there as well. So hopefully that can allow you to make informed decisions about your wine buying. So thank you again for joining us, and I do hope you'll manage to make some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Until then, bye for now.